Three friends boarded Disney's Galactic Starcruiser to seek their destiny and emerged as heroes of the Halcyon. Welcome to a special bonus episode of Heroes of the Halcyon. This is an additional part of our conversation from last week with Mike Celestino, the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at laughingplace.com. We chatted at length about two limited comic book series from Marvel, the Halcyon Legacy and Galaxy's Edge. Last week, we just gave you an overview of the comics and our thoughts about them. In this bonus episode, we'll be diving into a nearly full synopsis of the stories in each issue. If you don't mind the series being spoiled for you, this conversation is fun and really digs into the details. Let's take it away.
Of course, we can't talk about, the Halcyon Legacy and the Galaxy's Edge comic series without getting into full spoilers for those comic books. I don't believe there's any spoilers in either of those series that impact the actual Galactic Starcruiser experience itself in Orlando. But, I mean, we are going to have to kind of tear open. So if you want to stay spoiler free for the Halcyon Legacy comic series or the Galaxy's Edge comic series, this would be a great podcast to come back to at a future date. All right. So in the main line of the story here, the part one of Halcyon Legacy is titled the Storm on the Horizon. And as we mentioned previously, the story, the main wraparound story, does begin 1 month before the 275th anniversary cruise where it takes on. And we kind of meet several characters, coming onto the Star Cruiser. They're obviously there for, a vacation, a mission kind of thing. There's kind of some secrecy about what they're there for. But it's interesting to know they meet D309, and D309 actually recognizes one of these, passengers as having someone that had been on the Halcyon years and years before. So that's kind of interesting that they, D309, of course, would remember those things.
Well, D309 didn't remember me when I came back. I need to have a little chat with with that droid when I get back in May.
Well, you have to remember for D309, when you go back, it's kind of like a Groundhog Day kind of thing, resetting every time.
Good job, Mike. Love it.
I love that D309 is a standalone character. I thought that was kind of cool that D309 isn't just stuck on our, the screen on in our rooms.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And I just think the design of D309 is so cool from a visual standpoint. Merch, please, Disney. But what's interesting is that we get more information on several of the crew members. Like we determined, Captain Keevan has been in place on the Halcyon for some time now. Mm-hmm. We do know from dialogue on the Halcyon that the Halcyon was not her first. She started on the Halcyon, her career, but that's not the first ship she commanded. We found out while we were on the Halcyon. So it's kind of, but she's been the captain of the Halcyon now for some time. But it's Lenka Mox. She's brand new.
Yeah, she's
brand new.
In issue 2, I keep saying episode instead of issue, but in issue 2, she comes on board. So that was really interesting too.
But let's kind of go through the rest of the characters. Is that, Sammy, we know that Sammy comes on like right before the voyage. And interestingly, Sammy doesn't have any kind of presence in the Halcyon Legacy comic series at all.
Nope.
Really, the only characters to my recollection, and again, having just reread them, is we got Captain Keevan, we got Lenka Mock, SK620, and then Lieutenant Harmon Croy does make an appearance toward the end of the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But those are the only actual, I don't believe we see the Saja at any point in time. And again, maybe it was just too early to reveal that story point, to the writers. I don't know, but those are the ones that they actually focus on, that we get the most information from.
Well, and you're forgetting the most important character of all, the Lady H herself.
Yes, the lady. I still love that, the Lady H. But the major story component that kind of wraps around all of the current era events of the story is that the Halcyon is being attacked by a ruthless band of space pirates led by the infamous Crimson Jack, who we've referenced in our side fan films several times. But Crimson Jack is there looking, Crimson Jack says he has received a transmission from the Resistance to the Halcyon, and he wants to retrieve whatever this information is, whatever the spy is, and get the reward from the First Order. That's the kind of overarching main story, that they've got this attack going on and they have to figure out how do they deal with these space pirates.
So I thought it was really fun in the first issue how we actually had two flashbacks to earlier periods of time. There's the one period where we see Anakin Skywalker dueling with Asajj Ventress, and then we also go back to a period in the High Republic days. Mike, I haven't read the High Republic series, but I suspect that you have.
I have read almost all of it. There's a couple minor exceptions, but there's, like we were talking about before, there's just so much content coming out from the High Republic that it can be tough to keep up with all of it. But I'm like 95% of the High Republic. Yeah.
So were all those characters, I mean, there's three major characters. We don't have to go into specific details, but there's the two Jedi who are on board the Halcyon at that period of time. One is a Wookiee, one is another character. Yeah. I'm not sure. Are those characters part of the High Republic?
Yeah, so Buri Yaga, the Wookiee, is a big part of Phase 1 of the High Republic. In fact, not to spoil too much, but I would say there's a cliffhanger at the end of Phase 1 that has not been resolved yet.
Oh, wow.
Involving Buri Yaga. And his master, whose name I'm blanking on right now, is also present in the storytelling. Who's the third character? Just
the third character is there's a shot where as a Jedi are coming to the rescue, and I'm going to say it wrong, but Stellan Gios?
Yes. I believe it's Gios or Gios, but yeah, he is also a major character in Phase 1 of the High Republic.
That was the first time where as I'm reading, I was like, oh wait, so I'm going Wikipedia reading about all these guys and just seeing the amazing amount of content for Stellan. I mean, he must feature a significant part in just not only the books, but also the comics that they've done around the High Republic.
Oh yeah, Stellan is, I would say, one of the, if you had to pick like 5 or half a dozen major central characters of the High Republic, he's definitely one of them. I also wanted to, again, I keep diving back into what you guys have already said, but I wanted to mention, you guys have probably already talked about this, how the pirate Crimson Jack originated in the Legends continuity, the original Marvel Star Wars comic book line. So they kind of pulled him, one of these characters that they pulled in from Legends to populate the current canon. So that was exciting for me.
Well, I really loved that Stellan was there because the first thing I thought of is it made me want to read those comics and it made me want to read those books because this guy's a badass. I mean, can we say badass on this?
Yes. Yes,
yeah,
we
I think
can.
Okay, that's good. And he is, and just to see him coming into play and to see those super cool starfighters that they're flying in, it made me want to read. So that immediately fulfills the goal that Disney has for this hyperlinked media where everything's super interconnected. Without an editorial mark in the bottom right of the comic that says, editor, see High Republic issue 5 through 7, it immediately makes me want to read more of that stuff. I think that's really cool and very clever on Disney and Marvel's part. So were those starfighters in other comics, Mike? Do you know?
Those are the main mode of transport for the Jedi throughout Phase 1 of the High Republic. Yes, they're called vectors.
That's cool. And they are obviously I can see similarities to stuff we later see in the prequel trilogy, for example, but they weren't exactly the same. So it was really cool to see just this unique, in several parts, we saw really unique vessels that I immediately am like, well, I wonder if Martin has a model for this. Or I wonder if Mike does.
Well, it's funny, like the starship that the Wookiee Jedi Buri uses, it's kind of sort of reminiscent to the Arc fighters from episode 3.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Again, you look at them and it's not identical by any means. There were hundreds of years apart, but there's some design similarity.
Well, and the control mechanisms are identical. So now I'm like, okay, that's clearly that interface that the Jedi wear on their head that ties them into their fighters. That's clearly, that was nice and reliable 230 years ago. So clearly it works now.
I missed that. That was actually kind of cool.
There's also a moment in issue number 1 where they're talking about how the Nihil, which are the main villains of the High Republic, Phase 1, the way that they kind of appear out of nowhere, where there's no real hyperspace lanes around. And that's a major plot point in, again, Phase 1 of the High Republic. So yeah, it's tying in and getting you to want to read all that stuff, which is, I think, part of the idea of having all this interconnected storytelling.
And it's kind of interesting to see that the other Jedi that's on board the Halcyon in the flashbacks with Burry is it's kind of a Jocasta Nu looking elderly, looks like human female, but it's kind of cool that this older human Jedi is again very proficient with a lightsaber and jumps right into battle with the Nihil to protect the ship. And something else that's really interesting is to the best of my recollection, we also meet for the first time Shug Drabor, who created the Halcyon for the Chandrila Star Line, and he's the same species, of course, as we meet Babu Freak in Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, and he's just a really striking, fun character. He speaks with a very Scottish accent, which is kind of an interesting choice.
Yeah, I couldn't place the accent from the right. So.
I got Scotty from Star Trek, but again, your mileage may vary.
Well, I was hearing Babu Frick's voice in my head, so in my head, from the species, they all sound identical. That's it. Yeah,
Right.
Do you know the woman who voices Babu Frick in Rise of Skywalker is Moaning Myrtle from the Harry Potter franchise?
I did not know that.
know
Wow, that's wild.
Wow.
But it's kind of fun to see him. He's super proud. This is a brand new, starship, and he is not happy that these space pirates are shooting up his brand new cool starship.
But he's confident that the Halcyon can take him. So.
He's not gonna he's not gonna put up with it either way. So he orders several Halcyon crew members to their grisly demises
Get it together, red shirts, and save my ship.
Get off the bridge and repel these pirates. But it was fun to see Shug Drabor, being welcoming to his, passengers, being the guy. He's proud of his ship.
Yeah.
I was wondering how long Anzellans will live, like what the Anzellan lifespan is, because we don't see him in other flashbacks of this series. But we do know that obviously there are Anzellans in Rise of Skywalker with Babu Frick, and then a couple will pop up. If you guys have watched the trailer for season 3 of The Mandalorian, we're going to get some Anzellans in that too. But I was just curious if it's possible that we'll encounter Shug Drabor some point later on in the timeline.
What's really interesting is they still have, if you go up the stairway, they've got the little door for his office right there on board the Halcyon. I mean, I would just love it if they did some kind of media where he's still in there working away, making that ship as cool as it can be. I mean, I think that'd be fun.
That was actually one of my predictions that were incorrect about the Galactic Starcruiser. When the information came out about Shug Drabor being the architect of the ship, I was guessing that we would meet an animatronic Shug Drabor on board the Halcyon, but sadly that did not come to fruition.
Yet.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But let's kind of zip ahead to issue number 2 of the Halcyon Legacy. In my opinion, one of the coolest covers in the set. Again, I'm talking about the A series covers, the primary cover. And this one features Aura Singh and Zam Wessel. As Aura Singh, you saw in that, flashing, I'll miss it cameo she's watching the pod race in episode 1. And then, of course, Zam Wessel is the bounty hunter working with Jango Fett, or I should say killed by Jango Fett in episode 2. The Clawdite, the shapeshifter. But it was kind of interesting to see Aura and Zam working together on this. And let's just chit chat about the primary story. Why are these bounty hunters on board?
Well, I thought that was cool. They actually had that nice scene in the Sublight Lounge where we get to see the person who's hiring Aura to kind of, protect him from the other people who might want to have nefarious ends meet with him. So that was kind of fun to see.
Yeah, this guy did not do well at the sabacc tables and is in deep debt, and he has made some enemies here. And we'll kind of just breeze through the storylines because we have a lot to cover with the rest of these and Galaxy's Edge. But I thought it was fun to see established bounty hunters in play here. I mean, that was kind of a visual treat. And again, some people call it ridiculous fan service. I thought it was cool. I thought it was organic.
I loved how real. I mean, again, you mentioned that, the supposition is that maybe the artist didn't get real plans until the 3rd issue. But here I can see the sabacc table and I see the drawing. They clearly had enough from the concept art that he had an idea what it would look like. He didn't quite know what the bar looked like, so that's not perfect. But but the rest of it was right on. It was super cool to see the characters sitting in spots that I sat in. I mean, that was one thing that was super fun. I'm curious, Mike, what you think. It was fun to see, oh, wait, I was there. I was in that spot where that person sat.
Oh, I definitely got that a lot from the comic books, especially when they're, visiting the climate simulator. I think that's when Anakin and Padme come in later on in the story. But definitely felt that a few times going through this comic series. Like, yeah, I was there. I've stood in that exact location. This only exists on the Halcyon, and I've been on the Halcyon, and so have these characters. So yeah, now you feel like you're an interconnected part of the Star Wars narrative as well.
I mean, again, that just goes back to the fact that once you're on the Halcyon, you're canon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Until the day resets, Groundhog Day style.
So, of course, with Aura Singh and Zam Wessel being on board the ship, we kind of have we don't know exactly when we have a good idea. I mean, if we're going to go about a specific year, I would personally put issue number 2 taking place in what would we say 22 years before the Battle of Yavin.
Sure.
So basically before episode 2. I mean, we know Zam Wessel doesn't make it past episode 2, so it's got to be sometime slightly before.
Sure.
But the rest of the flashback issues kind of take place off the Halcyon, and it's just some quick, like, I'm not going to say arena battle. That's not fair. But they get sent down to try to find this kidnapped child, and they end up fighting.
But I actually have this issue open in front of me, kind of like a giant werewolf type thing.
They drew it with such detail. I wonder if it had featured in other.
I don't know it from anything else, but I could just be lacking in that area.
And then they quickly go, once the Predavorex is dispatched and the bad guys are defeated, they go back to the ship with the child.
And I have to point out that several of those bad guys are the same species as fan favorite Hondo and Akka.
Yes.
I thought that was really cool.
Weequay. Weequay, they never play good guys, do they?
Apparently not.
I know of a good Weequay in the cantina in Mos Pelgo in The Mandalorian. The bartender is a Weequay. And he's definitely a helpful Weequay. According to Wikipedia, this is the only appearance of the Predavorex.
Nice, excellent.
Let's throw a shout out to Wikipedia because it is
a lifesaver.
So this kind of brings up just a real quick side point is that I always read my comics, physical book. I love the issues. I love having the art. I love having the physical paper. But I'm kind of curious, Drew, you read most of your comics digitally.
I do.
Wouldn't it be amazing if you could just click on all these names and have it open up Wikipedia right within it?
That would have saved me so much time, not just last night, but the first time I was reading these. But
I differ in my opinion because I love paper comics and I hate trees. So I will always prefer to have the physical copy in front of me. I don't know. I can't read a digital comic book for whatever reason. It hasn't caught on with me. My coworkers make fun of me because I once said I prefer physical books because I can hug them and you can't hug a digital file.
That's right.
Now this has become a running gag at Laughing Place. But for whatever reason, I just can't get on board with digital comics. But
I'm gonna tweet you next week. Did you hug your comics this week, Mike?
There's nothing like having a 2-foot stack of bought but unread comics, cluttering up your countertops. And we know that well.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
But
yours is only 2 feet.
Amateurs.
That's just on the kitchen counter, Mike.
So issue number 3, kind of moving the forward a bit, is A Cause Worth Fighting For. And the big draw with issue 3 is that it significantly features prequel era Padme and Anakin. And the cover is just a gorgeous illustration of Padme and Anakin along with the Halcyon.
And I do like that they showed that just like his son, or his grandson, I should say, that Anakin liked to pose in shirtless and nice, looking all chesty there.
It's hilarious how built they make Anakin in this. I mean, he is just shredded, and hey, you got to throw the readers some candy. Okay, great. That's fantastic. But what's kind of cool is that in the setting in this one, the Hutts actually own the Halcyon.
Yeah, that was cool. That was really cool. Along with having a nice full size, or maybe a youthful Rancor just hanging out in the atrium, because as you do.
I actually wanted to ask you guys, because of your knowledge of the Halcyon, how do you think they got that Rancor into the atrium? Maybe he was brought on board. Maybe he was brought on board when he was smaller.
It is kind of fun to see that the Hutts are not taking great care of the ship. And I think we actually missed one kind of relevant point at the end of issue 1 is that Shug Drabor, the architect of the Halcyon, was so grateful to the Jedi for repelling the Nihil that's why he actually built the lightsaber training pods as a thank you, as an homage to the Jedi for their courage and strength and willingness to defend the passengers in the ship. So that's kind of a cool piece of lore that people ask, why is this lightsaber training pod aboard the Halcyon? Well, because Shug said so. I thought that was a cool little piece of lore.
Yeah.
Read the comics, you Philistine. Is that how you say Philistine? Or is it?
I like it. I like it.
Well, going on issue 3, it's just kind of fun to see, this is definitely set between episodes 2 and 3, because Anakin and Padme are absolutely 1000% together.
They're married,
but not publicly together.
Yep, they acknowledge the marriage in the climate simulator. There, right.
And it's funny because they actually say that Kenobi is taking part in this mission that they're on, but you never actually see Kenobi, which is kind of an interesting little sidestep there.
Yeah, he's waiting for them on the other side.
Yeah, definitely. But it was just fun to see, Anakin and Padme kind of sparring with each other inside the lightsaber training pod. I thought it was cool. And then just see them, hanging out in the climate simulator. And it's just fun because, like, you said, Drew, at this point in time, they definitely had more photographic reference to work from, because they definitely break open different locales in the ship.
The climate simulator is identical. Yeah. And it was Mike who was saying that by this issue, they'd seen things, but yes, the climate simulator is dead on. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy. And again, just to see, oh wait, I saw that plant and I know where the sign is that says what plant this is. This is so cool.
So cool.
This flashback was teased in issue number 1, where we saw that fight happening there was a moment where the wall gets scarred during this battle. And I didn't know this boarding the Halcyon, but my coworker Jeremiah pointed out to me that you can see those battle scars on the wall in the actual physical Halcyon.
And they're identical. I mean, obviously, again, that's where the snake's eating its tail. They're identical to what we see in the comic. And it's just so cool that they obviously have this whole thing combined and interconnected. Oh, it's so great.
And I remember you actually went looking for it.
I did.
You 100% said, I bet it's going to, you said, I bet money, folding money, it's going to be there. And sure enough, it was. That was kind of fun for you to find those.
You still owe me that drink, by the way, Martin.
I still owe you. Sold. But so the storyline is that Asajj Ventress is aboard the Halcyon to kind of smuggle this senator off board, who's trying to, the senator is kind of playing both sides, but he's got information that, Asajj needs to get to her clients. And they get into a huge lightsaber battle. And again, I personally am a big fan of the Asajj Ventress character.
She's also badass. Yes.
So bad. And just, there's so much more to that character than most people realize. And the conclusion to the character, which I don't want to spoil because it's in completely different media, is really a heartfelt, to me, very satisfying conclusion to the character. I mean, it goes to a place I didn't expect. It felt real. So I'm a huge fan of anything with Asajj Ventress.
Is that in the novel?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
yes.
I have not read that yet, but I do own it, so I'll get to that eventually.
The part of the stacks and stacks of unread, unread
that's
media.
Very accurate.
But it's kind of fun to see the Hutts actually step into the middle of this conflict and be like, "What are you doing fighting on our ship? We're going to eat you all." That they do not, and it's kind of funny because at this point it's the Republic, and the Separatists, I have to say, have to kind of defer. They're on board the Hutt's vessel. They need to, play by their rules. That's fun. Of course, Asajj Ventress kills the senator.
I was going to say that poor senator wasn't long for this world, and while it wasn't like really gory, they did the nice silhouette effect that they usually do in comics, but it was not a good end for him.
But it's that Asajj Ventress makes her escape by she had called her ship, silently, and it's waiting outside the window, and she of course explodes the window and flies into her ship and drives, flies away.
That does happen. That happens twice in this comic miniseries alone. A Jedi seals the hole that has been breached in the Halcyon.
Yeah, so I think Shug needs to take a look at the glass. They need some force fields or something around this, but it's kind of fun because the laugh at the end of the book is that when the Jedi saved the ship in issue 1, Shug is so grateful that he builds lightsaber training pods.
Right.
And in issue, 3, the Hutts are so grateful for getting their lives saved that they give the Jedi 1/2 off of their meal.
One meal.
And then you find out later that once cooler heads prevailed and some time had passed, they actually rescinded that discount.
I thought that was really, really funny.
That was a good bit.
So, but it's kind of fun to see Anakin and Padme, in their happy period. And again, happy as
they were
happy
clearly
at that.
happy.
At that point in time, they were. And you just kind of, it's sad to see where know where it ends up, but it's happy that they had these moments together of excitement, adventure.
In a weird way, I would say they almost sort of had their honeymoon aboard the Halcyon in the same way that Leia and Han do later on in the timeline.
That's the nice echoing there. Did Han and Leo also spar in a pseudo lightsaber training with their shirts off?
Not to my recollection, but they do go on a nice tour of pretty much everything you would see in your visit to the Halcyon.
Awesome.
Well, moving ahead then to issue number 4, The Heist on the Halcyon is the title. And this features the first meeting of Lando Calrissian and Hondo Ohnaka, which, again, we are all huge Hondo fans here. Rightfully so. He is a fantastic character. But let's kind of just chit chat about the core story is that, this resistance spy who you don't know who they are. There's a bit of a red herring. We're in spoiler territory. So they kind of lead you to believe that the rebel spy is someone that they're not. I mean, they're kind of playing the bait and switch, which common story technique. But the other thing that's kind of fun about this particular story is that it also features Maz Kanata.
And the fun thing about Maz is that she's one of those, she belongs to a species that's so long lived that you can pepper her in through the entire Star Wars timeline, including way back in the High Republic. Now she's popped up there and is interacting with the characters in that period. So she can make appearances in every era of the Star Wars story.
And she looks like she hasn't aged a day from back then, too.
Well, the core story then in the flashback of how all this heist happens on board the Halcyon is we're still talking about the flashback. What would it be between? Actually, this takes place right before A New Hope. We're talking directly before.
I thought it took place right before Empire, personally, because he references that he just took an administrator job.
You're right. So this would basically be 1 year after. This would be directly following the events of A New Hope.
Because they also talk about Alderaan having been destroyed already.
Yes, 100%. So at this point in the timeline, the Galactic Empire owns the Halcyon, and they are using it for their own purposes and whatnot. But it's kind of interesting that there's still passengers on board. They haven't completely eliminated that, which I would have thought that, for security reasons.
Were they established as passengers, like paying passengers, or were they other Empire?
No, because they say in the lower decks they say that the security on the upper levels is super tight, but the security with everyone down below is less so, which that implies to me passengers. Okay. I don't think they ever explicitly say, but I mean, they're not hiding on the ship. Let's put it that way. Again, so the conceit here is that the General Cardin that's kind of stationed aboard the Halcyon is basically creating a secret treasure trove of treasures stolen from across the galaxy.
And he's building it in a box that we may see later on.
And that's kind of fun, is that there's actually drawn several points in is that there's a vault. They actually call it a vault in this series where he's storing all this treasure, and he's of course not reporting it all to the Empire because they wouldn't appreciate all of these historical artifacts as much as he would. But I would absolutely love, from a visual standpoint, let's see, where is this vault? Do a holographic representation of all this treasure that's in the vault. I think that would be an amazing visual to see. But there's
now, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but in his vault, among the big pile of like Scrooge McDuck like treasure, or it almost kind of looks like in Pirates of the Caribbean when you go past that giant pile of gold pieces of 8. But I noticed a few artifacts that look like they end up in Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities. Now, I almost expected that. I remember reading this issue for the first time and thinking that's where the story was going, that Ethan Sachs would eventually tie this into Doc coming into possession of those artifacts. But I'm guessing it's just sort of implied that somehow this collection ends up in Doc's hands. I
love that they reference back to the Calicori totem that you get as a family heirloom on Ryloth. And then that the Halcyon, ties back into Ryloth because of Gaia and Wraith. I love that.
Oh yeah, that was cool.
Another little visual Easter egg that they're throwing into is that I believe it's the panel where they introduce General Cardin, and he's just feeding his face, just stuffing food in his face as much as he can.
He's very gluttonous, obviously.
But something I didn't notice on the first reading that I caught on my second reading is one of the things that's on his huge table of food is a plate of Ronto wraps.
Oh yeah, that was really
straight up Ronto wraps. And as very significant Ronto wrap fans in this talk, I mean, I thought that was fun.
We haven't done our episode, but I think we can talk for at least 45 minutes about Ronto wraps.
Oh, since Christine mentioned Gaia and Ryloth, I wanted to bring up, and I totally forgot to mention, I think it was in issue 1, they mentioned the hyperspace or the what was it called? The hyperspace compass, and how valuable the gem is, which is, of course, you guys know, the Hyananea. So they don't bring it up again ever in the comic series, but it was great to have a reference to that in here.
Was super cool.
Yeah, that's actually what they thought that the pirates were after. And then it turns out that they didn't have any clue about that.
Thank goodness.
But that really was that. I forgot about that. It was a great little thing to throw in there.
And it was intricately drawn, and it just looked gorgeous. Mm-hmm.
And the first time that you're looking into this vault that General Cardin has, you can see that there's this very familiar, for anyone that's seen The Force Awakens, wooden crate that we'll chat about in just a bit here. But Maz Kanata, the whole reason for her being on the ship is that she has brought forth this treasure that she's selling to this General Cardin for his collection. And he's not stealing it. He's legitimately purchasing it from Maz, which is kind of an interesting...
Legitimately.
Yeah.
Hard air quotes.
Co-opting. But what it is, it's something that I had never seen before anywhere in the lore, is it's the crown jewels of Alderaan. Which is just this beautiful gold, piece of jewelry with these red, intricate, gems throughout it. And of course, he does his authentication on the gems. Yep, these are from Alderaan. This must be the legit thing. Pays her 80,000 credits. And then we find out that, down below decks, where the Imperials are on the upper decks, and we say that the quote is that the Imperials may have had complete control of the above decks, but the lower levels were a different matter entirely. So either their security is terrible and they're just letting
it is the Empire
pirates and scoundrels aboard, aplenty, or they're taking on passengers and they're just keeping them at the lower level, which is true.
Who knows?
I don't know.
You can fill it in yourself.
But
it's the Lady and the Tiger all over again.
It would be a great scam, though. I mean, if they were still pretending that it was a passenger voyage ship and yet they were hoarding all these, treasures on board, it would be a good front.
It is kind of what, they deeply imply anyway, that this general is using the different stops around the galaxy to just build up his treasure trove. He goes somewhere, pillages the local artifacts, adds them to his collection. And that does actually kind of stand at why this would be still a passenger vessel. I'd be kind of curious to talk to the folks at the Lucasfilm Story Group and see where they stand on this.
I want a comic on every one of those artifacts.
Oh, I want replicas of all of these artifacts. But it's kind of interesting that Maz kind of, I'm not going to say outs this team of smugglers and thieves below, but they find out they become aware that these smugglers and thieves, that including Hondo and Lando, are down in the engineering room. That's where they're hiding. And it's kind of fun to see, the engineering room that we're all familiar with. And Hondo kind of escapes, and it's just kind of a big chase. And we find out that Lando has worked his way in a disguise as one of the Imperial officers, underlings, I should say, to the vault, and is kind of taking inventory with this General Cardin about everything in the vault. And he, of course, knocks out the general,
with the box.
With the box, and if I'm not mistaken, he actually straight up kills a couple stormtroopers that are straight there. But we find out that the gems, I should say the Alderaanian artifact that Maz brought was not legit. The stones were legit, but this was not the actual Alderaanian artifact that she was willing to give to the Empire.
Gold is gold. I mean, it's a constant through the universe, sure.
She does say that the actual crown jewels of Alderaan likely were destroyed in the destruction of the planet. So it's likely that Briha Organa was wearing them at the time of the planet's explosion, which is a dark image to conjure up in a
it is.
comic book.
Ouch. Yeah, that's.
There's a lot of mildly dark images. I mean, again, you never get really gory in this comic, but to that point, Mike, I mean, they don't shy away from showing that some people are going to have a lightsaber in inopportune parts of their body. And
so, as it turns out, we find out that Hondo and Lando are kind of just paid participants in this. They're here looking for treasure and whatnot. And, Hondo, is just, he keeps saying legitimate businessman. And I love the running joke with Hondo's every time someone calls him a thief or a scoundrel, he just pokes his head out of somewhere. Legitimate businessman. I love that. And like you mentioned, Drew, is that Lando does specifically say, I just accepted an administrator position. I just wanted one more adventure, which is fun.
That was cool.
This was who Lando was before this administrator position.
Yeah, and in Galaxy's Edge, when we talk about that in a little bit, I love that they weave the lore so that for folks who know this stuff, not just the High Republic era, but also the movies, it's fun to see that they tied this together. It was cool.
I did find that moment very funny where he's like, I'm going to go and become administrator of Cloud City now. This is right before that.
Yep.
But we find out that Maz, the entire reason that Maz was willing to take place in this heist at all, wasn't for any of the treasure itself. She just wanted this box that's made from this very sacred tree on Kashyyyk. And of course, this box turns out to be the box that holds Luke's lightsaber that we all see Rey find in A Force Awakens.
That was fun.
Yeah,
I love that we still don't know how Maz got that lightsaber. This is it's 8 years now almost since The Force Awakens came out, and Maz is like, oh, that's a story for another time. We still haven't gotten that story, but now we do know how she got the box. So don't worry, guys, we're getting there.
Slowly but surely.
I'm looking forward to the episode where we see how the hinges were made and perhaps the lock that's used. That'll be good.
Yeah, it's just so funny that that's a story for another time. Yeah, very, very other time.
Well, and we need to keep in mind, too, that this is just the flashbacks. There's still the other story that's happening behind the scenes with
very slowly happening.
Little pieces that are coming out.
We're still heading into the solar storm, and we're still going forward. Yeah.
If they only did the overarching narrative, how long would this? It would just be like one issue, right?
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, a couple hours, in fact. But to bring us up to where we are with the current story, I should say, is the grandfather character that we all believe is the Jedi, or I should say the Resistance spy, has just jettisoned himself from the Halcyon to try to lure the pirates away that are on board surrounding the Halcyon. So the grandfather character has selflessly sacrificing himself to save the passengers of the ship. And of course, we believe trying to get this. What is it that we should say that he has?
Information.
Yeah. Okay. So the grandfather character has, selflessly sacrificing himself to, not only, save the Halcyon and the passengers, but also, protect this information that the resistance has trusted him to, keep out of first order hands. And then there's the cliffhanger for issue 5.
Which I imagine, Mike, had to be one of your favorite issues.
Because Bosk is on the cover?
That's the reason, of course.
I remember anytime Bosk graces the cover of a comic book, I try to tweet it out on the Who's the Bosk Twitter feed. And I remember definitely doing that for this one.
It's one of the coolest covers, but it's so insane to me that the painted A covers for the Halcyon Legacy are just gorgeous. They are very well rendered. Yes. But it's just wild when you lay them all out together that issue 5 has got this yellow frame around the image, and all of the other ones have got a white frame. So there's just they don't tonally match at all. This last issue. Now I've since just photoshopped the white frame around it because I've got a collage of all of them on my wall, and I couldn't look at issue 5 without seeing this yellow just bothering me.
But enough about your problems with OCD, Martin. We'll talk about that at a later time.
It's a fantastic, but it's a gorgeous Bosk image. And again, with the Halcyon, I just love these covers because they keep showing you different angles of the Halcyon.
Yeah.
We keep getting different little pieces of, when you watched the Lego, holiday special, that took place on the Halcyon, you got some rendered shots of the Halcyon that were different there. And I love every bit of reference material we can get.
And I love that in issue 5, I think we see our first vision of the cargo hold, which is really cool. And again, it's rendered. I don't know. I mean, I haven't taken a picture to see if it's exactly the same, but it looks so close. The way the luggage is stacked, it's like, oh, it's been stacked like that for a month at this point.
Right.
Now, something else that happens in the present day story while the pirates are, outside the ship, they're chasing down this shuttle. They've got the grandfather now. But on board the ship, inside the atrium, there's a character that you meet, a female character, two antenna that in the flashbacks, she's come aboard with a male member, obviously a romantic interest of the same species that takes place. What is it? 9 years after the Battle of Yavin is the flashbacks. But at the same time, so outside the ship, the pirates have captured this shuttle with the grandfather. They've got him now. But on board the ship, we meet a character that we hadn't seen previously. And again, this is in the current timeline story. There's a female character, two antenna, who
very Andorian looking for those of you who like Star Trek.
Yeah, very, very Andorian looking. And then, we quickly flash back and see, something from, I believe it's 9 years after the Battle of Yavin for the flashbacks. So this would be, after Return of the Jedi. So we're kind of in the Mandalorian-esque era right now for the flashbacks. But it's just kind of interesting that we hadn't seen this character before, but she comes on board the ship in the flashback with a male of her same species, clearly a romantic interest, and that Bosk shows up as he's actually like.
Oh yeah, that full page spread where they drew him in the cargo hold was just gorgeous.
Yeah, I mean, he's just ripping off the cloak, and it's the big Bosk reveal, and he has a fight with this male of the species, and it's just kind of fun that they actually defeat Bosk, so which is kind of interesting. You'd think a Trandoshan, the species of Bosk, you would be able to rip this character from limb to limb. But
I have a funny tidbit to add here.
Oh, excellent.
I did a little bit of research in the last minute, and I found the name of the species of these two characters. It is called the Balosar. And if you guys remember Star Wars Attack of the Clones, the character of Elan Sleazebagano, who tries to sell Obi-Wan the Death Sticks, is also a Balosar.
So ratcheting up the tension as we hurtle toward the series finale.
The climax is coming.
The climax is coming. The Crimson Jacks team has captured, the grandfather character, brought him aboard the ship. They're questioning. They believe they've got the spy they're looking for. And then we kind of go back into the flashbacks with these two Balosars, and it's just kind of interesting. I can't really determine what's happening. But then 4LOM shows up.
That was super cool.
Which is super cool.
I love that character.
So another one of the Empire Strikes Back era bounty hunters. And again, this is after Return of the Jedi happens. So, but it's just kind of cool to see not only Bosk show up, but we get another Empire bounty hunter, 4LO. And again, I'm never going to not look at that character and say Zuckuss in my head, because again, they had the names switched when the action figures originally came out. But I think the rendering is super cool.
4LOM?
That's the name.
That's how I always said it.
That bugs me too, but that is the official Lucasfilm pronunciation of that character. I will always say 4LOM.
Okay.
Yep.
But in universe, whenever they write out the name of a droid's character, they spell out the phonetic pronunciation of the individual letters and numbers.
Okay. Sorry.
So that is correct.
It was hurting my heart. I was like, 4LOM.
I'm with you, Christine. I will always say 4LOM.
I say let's leave that in, because frankly, that definitely gets left in.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Absolutely. No, it's going in.
I should have never doubted you at all, but I was like, 4LOM. What?
And it's funny. So 4LOM comes in and he attacks this male partner, and then the female just jabs a shiv into 4LOM's neck, and apparently like just freezes. That's like the droid freeze button, because they have just moments to escape before he reboots.
That's good information to know in case you're ever faced with an assassin droid.
Shiv the neck. But it's kind of interesting because they actually Zuckuss is there as well. So we get 3 of the original bounty hunter members that there's actually, well, we're going to just kind of hold on just a moment, because this is our first kind of crossover character. We get the one character, the bounty hunter character that's in the Galaxy's Edge comics showing up here.
So not only do we get a character from the Galaxy's Edge comics, but we also get 2 of the characters from Ethan Sachs' Bounty Hunters comic book here, which is kind of my little nitpick about this final issue of Galaxy's Edge, is that it kind of spoils that these characters, because right now the Bounty Hunters comic book is set between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and there's all these cliffhangers like, oh, are these characters gonna survive? And now in the Halcyon Legacy comic book, we see that not only Bosk and 4LOM and Zuckuss are around, but also Tonga and Lasha from the Bounty Hunters comic book are alive and well in this period post Return of the Jedi. So it kind of takes some of the narrative suspense out of the Bounty Hunters comic book, but I guess that's okay. That Star Wars does that kind of thing a lot, but it was cool to see them pop up regardless.
That's weird that they would do that though, Mike, because this was written so long before the Bounty Hunter series started. It was
in the middle of the Bounty Hunters series coming out. So Ethan Sachs had already introduced these characters. I want to say it was probably 8 or 9 or 10 issues into the Bounty Hunters series when this comic book came out.
Okay.
So all the bounty hunters come in, and we've got now Zuckuss is in the mix, and some of the characters we met in the Galaxy's Edge comic book separately. But the kind of conceit is they take the boyfriend away, and she never sees him again, and she assumes he's murdered. But what's kind of interesting is that he has paid for her cabin on the Halcyon for 100 years before he got captured and went away. So that's how she's still there when the current events are happening. And this was only 20 some odd years, between these two events. So,
and approximately 40,000 Felucian shrimp later.
For 40,000 Felucian. Yeah. So the kind of interesting thing is this female character should be on the ship during the anniversary voyage, and she could pop up at future points throughout the Halcyon timeline going forward. She should be canonically on the ship.
It was really cool.
Hey, you know how flamingos get their pink color from eating shrimp?
Yes.
Do you think if you eat enough blue shrimp, you would start to turn blue?
I plan to try that out on my next voyage. I'm just going to say.
Yeah, I think it'll be a tie between Drew and Martin to see who turns blue first.
All right, so let's just kind of the big wrap up. We do get a couple more familiar faces popping up. Is that the pirate characters that are attacking the Halcyon get defeated. Lenka Mock and Captain Kevin attack the pirates that are holding the bridge.
And I need to interrupt you because both Lenka Mock and Captain Kevin are also badasses.
Yes.
And it was super fun to see a little bit more about them kind of going in and actually taking an active role in fighting the pirates. I believe 2 of the pirates meet their demise at their hands, as a matter of fact. So it's good to see that they're not afraid to get their hands dirty when they need to.
I like one of the lines that one of them has is the self-defense training that the Chandrila Star Line pays for is starting to pay off.
They paid a lot of credits for that training. Exactly.
So what's interesting is back on Crimson Jack's ship, he sends out a message to the First Order, and who, of course, answers this call, but Lieutenant Harmon Croy via hologram. And, Crimson Jack is very pleased to say, I've got your information.
I thought it was interesting that they chose to portray Harmon Croy with the beard.
In the actual drawing, I don't believe so, but there has been a Harmon Croy. This is kind of funny because this drawing of Harmon Croy looks to me like very accurate to one of the actors that has portrayed.
It does. It looks very much like him.
Yeah.
Which is odd because, again, that's the only time, Captain Kevin kind of looks fairly consistent. I haven't seen any of the Lenka Mocks that vary wildly from each other, but like this I've seen Croys that are like vastly different in appearance.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen
some of them look a lot like Sammy. It's kind of interesting.
So weird.
But yeah, that's the only time we see it. But of course, then Harmon Croy finds out that the information is garbage and that the grandfather pulled the bait and switch, and the granddaughter turns out to be the actual spy with the information. And
well, and I'm curious, Mike, what's your interpretation of that? Was he the spy and he just gave the information to the granddaughter, or was the granddaughter the spy all along?
That was a little muddled for me as well. I'm not sure 100% either way, but I like to think the intent was for the granddaughter to be the spy all along, and the grandfather was just there to kind of escort her.
That's cool. That's awesome.
But there's the planet that they end up on is Cessid, which is I'm not familiar with that planet being anywhere else in the lore. Has anyone else heard of Cessid?
No, I don't know that planet either.
But it's just kind of interesting that Vi Marati is the one that they meet on planet to give this information to. And again, this is 1 month before the cruise. So Vi's got to definitely go from this planet of Cessid back to Batu in fairly short order because she's there on planet during the events of the 275th anniversary cruise.
Luckily, transport in the Star Wars universe is fairly instantaneous, so that works out nice.
Moves at the speed of plot, as they say. I'm doing a little research here about Cessid. Again, it actually originated in Legends timeline in a book called Alien Encounters. I'm not sure. Oh, this is from the role-playing game. So a deep cut Star Wars role-playing game.
But kind of moving on to so let's kind of talk about some of the major hits in issues 1 through 5. And I'd say the kind of the coolest thing in episode or issue 1, I should say, of the Galaxy's Edge comic is you get to kind of see Sarlacc in a different way.
I love that. And again, I'm talking to Mike and Martin. Have we ever seen Sarlacc's mobile like that before?
No.
Not to my knowledge.
In the Super Star Wars game for the Super NES.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Nice. Was it the same kind of deal?
No, it was completely different. But it was just kind of a cool concept to see a baby Sarlacc hasn't grown rooted itself, I should say, in one location yet, and to see them and you specifically see the container with the Sarlacc creature that you see in Doc Ondar's shop. You see that in the comic completely as it is in real life, and I thought that was really fun. And it's something I'd never really noticed is how similar the Sarlacc that's in Doc Ondar's is to the mini Sarlacc they sell in and around Galaxy's Edge.
It's almost identical, just miniaturized, obviously, in the one you buy.
And I will say for anyone that's still looking is that baby Sarlacc prop that they sell, it's only like $35. It's motorized. The tentacles move. It's so cool. It's one of the best values, I think. I was super happy with it.
My question is, there's a line about the Sarlacc eventually outgrowing its tank, which we know has not happened yet by the time of Galaxy's Edge. And he acquires it. Doc Onders acquires it from Han Solo, would you say pre A New Hope?
Yep.
So it's been roughly 30 something years. How long does it take for the Sarlacc to outgrow that tank?
They grow very slowly.
Interestingly, yeah.
Well, when you feed it, you only have to feed it once every 1,000 years. So, that works out pretty nice.
But it's just kind of fun to see some further adventures of Han Solo and Chewbacca. But kind of zooming forward to issue number 2, it starts with a piece that we saw from Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, on Megiddo with Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi getting executed in the aftermath of Order 66, and because his lightsaber kind of it plays a kind of important part in the continuing events of this particular issue.
And of course, it stars issue 2, Holly Fry favorite Greedo, of course.
And what's really cool is that Greedo is kind of portrayed in this issue as significantly more of an action-oriented character than we've seen him.
He apparently never misses.
And they make it, that's a big point in this. I think that's really, really funny.
And Mike, as I recall, didn't they hint at the end that this is maybe right before? How did they hint at that? Do you remember that?
Well, it is less specific than the Lando thing, because Lando is like, oh, I'm going to go and become Baron and Administrator. And then at the end of this comic, Jabba sends Greedo off to collect a bounty. He doesn't say exactly who it is, but the implication is that he's sending Greedo off to his death. Yeah, trying to collect the bounty on Han Solo.
Well,
I believe, unless I'm reading that wrong.
No, that's exactly how I read it. I read it. And it's good to know that since Greedo never misses, he'll be just fine.
But it's kind of interesting that you also get, another action-oriented Wookiee character. And we can't get enough of the big Wookiee characters in this. And you see the Wookiees fighting alongside. And this is not a good Wookiee character. This is a bounty hunter Wookiee character inside the market on Black Spire Outpost.
Well, they can't all be as nice as Lumpy.
These are the characters they need walking around Galaxy's Edge.
I agree. Well, real quick, I loved issue 3 because issue 3 featured everyone's favorite legitimate businessman.
Who doesn't love Hondo? I mean, come on.
Yeah, I do think, is this the issue where I think he said at one point, he even called himself a pirate? I mean, a legitimate businessman.
I mean, he's only been legitimate for a little while. So, every once in a while he slips back.
Yeah.
So
I have a very specific nitpick about this issue, and I'm not sure if this jumped out to you guys as well, but I loved seeing the interior of Oga's Cantina.
Yes.
One of my favorite spots in Galaxy's Edge. And we're introduced to Hondo in that space as well. And you can picture the exact place where he's sitting when you first meet him. But there's a point in the story between panels where he's sitting in one seat in a booth, and then in the next panel he's in the opposite side of the same booth. And I was just like, oh, that didn't make any sense. Continuity,
a little continuity error there. It's good to see they're in comic books as well.
Yeah.
Well, he has to keep moving. I mean, you never know when somebody's going to come in and have a grudge.
You got to keep your back to the wall, like Wild Bill Hickok.
Maybe he scooched over to get a better vantage point. Maybe.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, the trick in the bar is to keep the sight line with the servers and the bartenders.
Right.
Well, unless you're Hondo, and then you got to keep a sight line for that front door to see who's coming in.
Exactly.
Now, one thing completely off Star Wars that I really did like about these Galaxy Edge comic books is that every single issue had a full page spread. Some people would call it filler, but as a comic book fan of old, they had a full page spread of, an old reprinting of a Stan soapbox, which was the Stan Lee commentary that he would put in all these Marvel issues from the 60s, 70s, and so on. And they took some of the highlights and did a full page reprint. And some of these are really profound. Yeah. And as someone that Stan Lee was really a formative, role in their, imagination and upbringing as a kid, it's just kind of fun to see the little nod in these issues.
And I want to say these were published pretty soon after Stan Lee's passing, which is the reason that they did that.
That's cool.
And so the major piece of 3 is we do get to see the Temple of the Wills, I should say, on Jeddah, the planet of Jeddah you see in Rogue One, and they actually go into the temple there, which again, you can see that this is where they're stealing all the Kyber crystal from in Rogue One. You know, we don't know what for at the time, but we find out that they're using it for the Death Star turbo laser. This is what powers the laser on the Death Star. But we find out that there's just a lot of Kyber in this Kyber temple, and Doc Ondar needs to go retrieve some piece of it, a little sculpture. And he goes in with Hondo to go retrieve this, and we do get a cameo from an actual Rogue One character, Chirrut Imwe. I'm one with the Force is with me, which is fun. And it's kind of interesting that Star Wars is a lot of conflict and lightsaber swinging, but Doc Ondar ends up just making a very peaceful rationale as to, please let me take this away, and here's why.
Yeah.
And Chirrut actually says, take it and go. Which to me is very in character for Chirrut. It made sense. He wasn't taking something they didn't have thousands of, but I actually liked that. I mean, we see enough lightsaber swinging and lightsaber blasting that for Doc Ondar just to say, hey, this has actually got something to do with my family, and I need to solve my parents' murder, and this is going to help. I thought that was kind of a cool point.
Does he use the Ki-Adi Mundi lightsaber to cut the sculpture loose from the Kyber crystal? I thought that was a cool tie back to the previous issue. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was good to see that, Doc knows how to use one of those things.
Yeah. He was very precise because it looked so nice and neat after he removed that statue.
I will say that that's one of the only nitpicks that I would say with this series is the scale is sometimes off and on. It's like, wait, how big is this sculpture? And then when he cuts it, it's like, oh, it's much smaller than I was picturing. And so I get it. I mean, you can't be perfect all the time, but that was my minor nitpick.
Well, I thought issue 3 was definitely one of the standout issues. It was fun to see a brand new location, that we hadn't seen, the Temple of the Kyber on Jeddah. But issue 4, for me, it really kind of stepped things up from a cameo perspective, because we get to see a character that was introduced in the comics and really has kind of exploded in popularity.
Yes,
Christine,
very much so.
who of course is this?
Yeah, this is Dr. Ephra.
Love this character.
Yeah, and I thought this was one of the most so Dr. Aphra is very clearly kind of an Indiana Jones and on the moral gray side. And when Dr. Aphra first came into the Star Wars comic series, it was pretty clear that that's how we were going to go with her. And it was really cool to see a really nice Indiana Jones-esque experience here in this comic. What did you think of it, Mike?
Yeah, this is a fun kind of a two-parter to wrap up this miniseries, because they introduced the concept of this sword that I believe Dr. Aphra is in possession of the blade or the hilt or one of them, and Doc Ondar has the other half, and they want to put them together, and both sides want to hold the complete thing. But yeah, I think it's just a nice way to bring in one of my personal favorite characters from the Star Wars comics, Dr. Aphra.
And Dr. Aphra, I mean, for folks that haven't read the comics, this is a character that actually scammed Darth Vader and lived to tell about it. So she's kind of a significant piece of the lore.
Well, game respects game. Remember, we've covered this before.
I love it. And issue 5 kind of completes the story. There's a little bit of I'm not going to say a cliffhanger ending with 4, but 4 definitely leads right into 5. And Mike, can you tell us all about that?
Doc Ondar kind of cons the gang that was trying to con him, and the twist at the end of this miniseries is that Doc Ondar was actually the one who hired them the beginning.
That's right.
But I guess his long game was that he wanted to acquire both pieces of this sword.
Cool.
That, again, you can go to Galaxy's Edge and see this sword hanging on the wall in Doc Ondar's Den of Antiquities. And he ends up paying them anyway. So they kind of they're not happy at the end, that gang, but they did get credits out of it anyway. So I think everybody kind of wins.
And something else I really do like about the Dr. Aphra character is her 2 droid companions, because they're completely different than most things you've ever seen. Is that there's a protocol droid, 000, who's a black protocol droid, C-3PO-esque, but with very dangerous looking fingers. And this droid is out to kill
And red eyes. Yes, yes.
It's a super cool visual. And then, I don't think it's an R series, but it's an R-esque series droid, BT-1. But something that's fun is, though we have gotten action figures of Dr. Aphra and these two droids. One of my favorite pieces of merch, series of merch that's created, is the Gentle Giant creates the jumbo size action figures. They take the old retro series action figures from the 70s and 80s and just scale them up to 12 inches. And they're starting to do other eras besides the old Kenner characters. They just did a Darth Maul in old Kenner style, released him. They just announced this past week that 000 is getting one of these jumbo characters. So we get a 12-inch 000 in old Kenner style, which is going to be pre-ordered that like instantly. So I got to throw Gentle Giant. Keep making those jumbo figures. I will keep buying them.
I did not hear about that. That's very cool news.
That concludes our deep dives into both the Halcyon Legacy and Galaxy's Edge limited series comic books. They're both a lot of fun, and as we said in our review last week, they add a great deal of flavor to your experiences both in Batuu and aboard the Halcyon. We definitely recommend picking up both series. You can find them in trade paperback form on Amazon or wherever you get your comics. They would be especially fun to read on the plane ride to or from the parks. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon. Tabuite!